Okay, I think we can start now. Welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. My name is Johanna. I'm from the Renewables Grid Initiative, and I'm very happy to welcome you on another installment of our webinar series on good practices that we are lucky to jointly co-organize with ENTSO-E, who is also here today to say hello. Today we are going to look at a very interesting tool. It's called a 3D decision support system. It was developed together by Swissgrid and the ETH Zürich, and it's a tool that improves planning decisions when you plan new routes for power transmission lines. Now we're going to have a quick look at the agenda. This is what is going to happen today. I'm going to say very briefly, hi, who we are, why we do this, and then we have a welcome by the ENTSO-E's Secretary General Laurent Schmidt, which we're very happy to have here today. And then we have Joram, Schito, and Joshu Jullier from Swissgrid and ETH Zürich, who will introduce the practice to you, and then we'll have lots of time for questions afterwards, so you can ask everything that you have been wondering or questions that came up. Before we start, we are recording this webinar so that you can show it to your colleagues later, and it's going to go up on our YouTube channel and then on our website as well. There's also in this tool that you see on the side in the where you can see who's attending, there's a document where we have put the PDF of the presentation so that you can download it. It's under documents to the right. Now, to the Renewables Grid Initiative. Most of us will know you, but just briefly for those who don't, we are an association of 23 now, TSOs and NGOs, and we want to further the energy transition and have more renewables in the system by building grids in a transparent and environmentally sensitive way. This is our memberships, and as you can see, they are from all over Europe. One of our core activities is sharing good practices. We do this because we firmly believe in the value of sharing good practices that may then inspire future grid projects and make them better. And we have several different ways of doing this. We have a database, we have publications on this, we do learning journeys, we have an award with 3 categories. We also have workshops, and where you are today, we have webinars where we share good practices. Now, I would love to hand over to Laurent Schmidt, ENTSO-E's Secretary General, for some welcoming words.
Okay, so thank you, Joanna, for inviting me today to introduce your very interesting webinar. At ENTSO-E, we are very happy to support RGI in organizing this webinar to further help disseminate how our TSO community is working on their important grid expansion projects. As most of you know, introducing more renewable into our system requires 3 things: upgrading the system, updating the market design, as well as finding new ways to operate the system with large amount of renewable, and all our members are very implied on these 3 aspects. But across the 3 aspects, grid expansions remain up to now the most cost-efficient way to introduce renewables and achieve the European climate targets on time. If we don't do this expansion, the European could pay as much as 40 billion extra in their power bill if, due to lack of power grids, more than 150 terawatt-hours of green electricity could be lost and wasted due to curtailments and difficulties of managing security of supply if we don't do this expansion. So these expansions are really at the core of the introduction of renewable into the system. So this is why our members, such as here today, we're going to hear about Swissgrid, are really trying to find new innovative ways to involve communities in the building up of this transmission project, which are, as what I said, essential for society as a whole. And making use of digital technology, we are going to hear today about how can the digital technology help into this optimized planning. I would like to wish all participants a great webinar and really encourage you to visit our ENTSO-E.eu website and connect with us in social media to learn more on the work which our TSO members are doing to enhance our power systems, and of course contribute and provide best ideas to do this in the future. So very much looking forward to the outcome of this webinar, and all the best for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, before I hand over the presenters, I wanted to just briefly explain to you how this works for the questions. If you have any questions during the presentation, on the panel, you can put them into, there's a question button or also in the chat, and then afterwards I will read them out. Now, we are very excited to have Joram and Joshu present this practice. It's a 3D tool that weighs in different stakeholders' interests, and it can have a huge impact on finding a consensus solution and finding actually the most optimal route for everyone involved. So with that said, we are very excited to see how it works and what your experience has been so far. And I will just briefly hand over the screen to you.
Show my screen. Do you see the presentation now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Joram Schito from ETH Zürich and I, Joshu Jullier from Swissgrid, we welcome you to this RGI webinar about the 3D decision support system for planning power lines. Before we go into the details, I will come to the context. I'm working for the Swiss transmission system operator, TSO, in Switzerland, Swissgrid. We have the 380 and 220 kilovolt grid, we own it, and this means we operate it, we maintain it, and we also expand it and modernize it. And I will come now to this modernization, with also Lauren Schmidt also mentioned before. In Switzerland, the picture is similar than in whole Europe. We have existing bottlenecks. A big part of our lines are from the 1950s and 1960s, and for another time, not for the energy transition. So we have to modernize the grid to make it, to prepare it for the energy transition. And in Switzerland, if you look at the bottlenecks, we have a bottleneck between north and south. We have a region in south here. This is the Valais. Valais is a mountainous region with a lot of hydropower, and the energy have to be transported to the north, to the consumption region, Zurich, Bern, Lucerne, and all these cities. And there we have a big bottleneck. Now we have to expand the grid, and there, if we look at the reasons or the drivers for grid expansion in Switzerland, we can identify three main drivers. The first driver is our new large power plants, as for example the 900 megawatt pump storage Nanderance, also in the region of Valais, which the energy of this plant have to be transported as well to the regions in the north. Then the second driver is import, export, and transit. This is also very important for Switzerland, because in Switzerland we import electricity in winter and we export in summer. Then the third driver is the supply of the distribution grids. Also, we have to connect the transmission grid with the distribution grid, and also lines are necessary for that. And this leads us to following map of 10 important grid expansion projects, and these projects are necessary until 2025. And what we can see there already now is that we won't reach this target now, because there are some projects we will reach 2025 to finish them, but a lot we won't finish. And to give you an example for a large delay, I will just say you the Chamonix-Chipis project, which is also important for the connection of the pump storage non-dedrance. There we received the approval to construct in 2017 after 31 years of planning and approval process. And why are these delays? You see already here, you see some houses below lines. Some of you wouldn't be disturbed of it, but if we ask the population, a big part perceive high voltage.
Joram, we cannot hear you. Joshu, we cannot hear you anymore. Joshu. Oh,
not there.
Okay, I'm very sorry. We're going to try to fix this. Not sure what happened there.
Into consideration all these perceptions and problems and also interests of stakeholders, we have developed the 3D decision support system for planning power lines. The main objective is to find the solution with the highest acceptance among all stakeholders. And we do this with a multi-criteria decision analysis, which allow to include all these interests and all the important factors to construct a new line. Joram will go more in detail after in that. And in the end, the product will also help us because it visualizes the lines or also the corridors for the direct affected individuals, and we can show the line to them on information events, and so can decrease the fears as well with these visualizations. And now this project is made by 2 institutes at ETH Zürich and together with industrial partners as, for example, Swissgrid. And at this point, I will hand over to Joram Schito. He will explain you this silver bullet, the 3D decision support system. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. As Joshu told before, it's all about choice. We have to decide which route we want to go for the future power transmission line. Which means in our case, as we focus in a study area in central Switzerland, between Innerkirchen in the south and Mettlen in the north, that's a project together with Swissgrid. You see on the sheet that there are lots of possibilities. You have the west possibility, then 2 in the center, 2 east possibilities. But the question now arises, how disruptive, how risky, or how expensive are these corridors, these solutions? And we want to tackle this. We want to tackle this not just for overhead lines, but also for earth cables in future. That's our main objective. And we take into consideration the technical feasibility, as well as environmental landscape issues, as well as planning. And the concept behind it's everything about multi-criteria decision analysis, a very long term with a very long tradition. It's a tool set of mathematical rules in order to find the best solution among different stakeholders. And we combine this with geographic information systems. The main questions I want to answer you today are these. The first is, how can we achieve realistic modeling? That's also one of my personal goals in my PhD project, in order to enhance the degree of realism of the modeled results. The second question is, how can overhead lines be combined with earth cables? This is an issue we are tackling now, and we are working on a solution which should be interesting also because it uses a very novel approach in this regard. Okay, some words to the 3D DSS project. What does DSS means? Yeah, but it's very simple. DSS means it is a decision support system. It's meaning a system which aids decision makers to get a good intention which choice should be done in the end with the least amount of post-decision regret. That's the definition, decision support system. And therefore, we also called the project we are working on 3D DSS. That's our link to our homepage. It's 3ddss.ethz.ch. You can also follow us on Twitter with the latest news on 3ddss_ethz. Okay. So far, what exactly are we doing? If you plan, as you know, an overhead line or a nerve cable, then you start with a very broad study area, and then you narrow down this area the longer the more. You go to the planning area, and then you have to decide what exactly you want to plan. Either you plan an overhead line or a nerve cable. And we are right now able to compute the whole overhead line section up to the very exact pylon's position, which takes a bit of computing time, but yeah, and is thought for the end phase of this decision-making process. Whereas, on the other hand, we are currently working on combining both approaches, the overhead together with the earth cable approach, in order to compute also reliable and realistic earth cable corridors. And we are working on the lower branch right now. So some words how our system works. I told you before, MCDA, that's multi-criteria decision analysis. This is a tool set, a mathematical tool set, in order to get the optimal result from a task with or either different layers, different data, or different participants which want to solve this problem. And we combine this together with a tool or an approach called least cost path analysis. And the concept behind is that first you have to consider laws, acts, and protected areas, which are protected by law, and you give them some costs. You define a specific amount of costs so that the future line shouldn't pass this area which is very costly. So costly areas should be avoided, whereas cheap areas, in terms of virtual costs, should be preferred. The second key concept is, as I told you before, that if costs are low, then the suitability for a new power line accordingly is high. These two concepts together we put into a frame, into a system, in order to compute the solution automatically. So here, short presentation how it works. We base the whole system on so-called georeferenced data, which means geodata. That's our protected areas. You see green, this could represent some forests, and purple streets. And you can add also lakes and water bodies on the top, and so on and so on. What you want to protect, what you mean is worthy to protect, you add to the system. In the second phase, you generate by applying a specific MCDA formula cost surface, which means that it accumulates the costs based on your decision or based on your interests, and you rules what you want exactly to protect, how much, and then the total cost sum is derive from this. And we derive by means of an optimization algorithm, in the end, the most feasible corridor. The more yellow the area is, the more suitable the solution is. So let's go to a live demo. Okay, that's our tool. And you see there on the left different categories. As I told you before, landscape and environment protection, living environment and urban planning, and construction and maintenance. And here you have, as you define it, or as we defined it together with Swissgrid in our project here in central Switzerland, we have different layers and categories like reserves, protected areas, geotopes, mires, forests, and so on. And you could easily change the weight in order, based on your interest, how much you want to protect this specific area. And you can define resistance according to the legal base. And you can do this in our model, we have right now 33 such factors. But it's open because the algorithm doesn't take so long to compute the solution, which means you choose a specific algorithm. We, in our case, chose simple additive weighting. Click on the button. This is real time. That's live. Real time, it has been computed. Then second click, that's real time. We can blend off the cost surface, and the system suggests now this corridor here in the east of this lake here, makes a turn here around this mountain, and then it goes here. It surpasses Lucerne. Here is Lucerne, and it goes northwards and eastwards to the station. You can also compute the costs. It will cost, based on our estimation, totally 147 million francs. So what I want to present you now, okay, so this is very simple, very easy. You could also change to 3D mode. But in the end, important is to define together with the stakeholders a mathematical formula which you want to apply, because we now applied sharp edges. But you could also take continuous edges and then compare the one solution with sharp edges to the new solution with, here you are. Because by considering, and I will explain this concept later on, you find different corridors, which means that the corridor here in the east of the lake is blended out, because under this circumstances, under this consideration of this specific model, other alternatives come into question. Let's say by going through this valley or by passing the lake on the west side, which means this tool is very powerful in generating different alternatives, which then could be discussed later on together with stakeholders. So also this solution could be computed. Now we switch to 3D mode. Okay, 3D mode. And we have a very slow connection today. I beg your pardon. Yes, it's very slow. You can also zoom into the whole landscape. Yeah, it lags. It lags a little bit because we are using so many different tools today. Here we are. Okay, you could shift it. You can also blend in. We have also 3D LiDAR data, which is high resoluted here into the model. And you can then compare the old line, which was estimated to be the optimal choice here, as my mouse cursor is right now, or the new here in the east. But now, I beg your pardon because of the slow internet connection. But here, yeah, right now it should work a bit better. Yeah, and here you see, okay. Yeah. Okay. I suggest to go on because of this very slow internet connection. I'm sorry. Well, some words to current results and work. What did we find out? What are we currently working on? The main point, as I told you before, what my main interest is to make the whole decision model as most realistic as possible. That's my personal intention I have. So here, decision makers want to choose between a few possibilities, a few alternatives, not millions, because the computer or the system can generate millions of possibilities, but which is then in the end really the best solution? Which means we must redefine the whole question and ask how much the decision model be defined in order to compute clear distinguishable alternatives. And we were explicitly interested in which parameters control this distinguishability. So we found it out. We know that the boundary model, as I explained you before, by considering or sharp edges or continuous edges, that's the most influential parameter, followed by the mathematical model you apply, the MCDA method. And these both represent concerns of citizens you can tackle by applying this tool, perhaps on a workshop together with citizens when you are informing affected citizens about the future project. So one key result is our world as it is continuous. It is not sharp, it is continuous, because we know it that the results are more reliable if you consider continuous borders. That's one point. As you see there on the right, continuous instead of sharp-edged. That's one key result we have. The second is simply KISS. KISS means keep it short and simple. As you keep your decision model as short and as simple as possible, you can also explain it transparently and very simply to the stakeholders involved in the whole decision process. And we also know from our mathematical models that these models, which are most easiest, are also the most reliable models. So our recommendation is keep it simple. Keep it very simple in order that add the weights and the resistances simply up, explain it very simply, and also the utility functions, which means that if you ask a question whether this is feasible or very feasible, medium or not feasible, and extremely not feasible, so take into consideration that people think very easily, so that feasible, very feasible is double as much as feasible, for example. So let's go on. We also conducted a study with 10 planning experts during the last months, and we asked the participants whether they could define an ideal scenario based on their personal interests. And at the same time, we asked participants whether they could draw a line which they have in mind, which mentally represents their opinion best. There, you see all these drawn lines on the left side. Our model then computed without that participants knew the solution computed by the model. We then confronted the participants with the models we computed. You see them on the right. And you see that we are very, very accurate. So our tool finds, plus or minus, it finds really all the solutions. We have to state at this point that the green lines which went through the middle, this shouldn't be considered in future because of legal prerequisites. So in the middle on the left, you see there, this area shouldn't be considered. And then we asked also, listen, you see this green line, you passed here a protection area, but we computed that it would be better for you to pass here through this canyon. Would you agree in changing your opinion? And yes, indeed, some participants agreed in changing their mind, changing their opinion in order to abandon, which was proposed by the 3DSS. And we also got very good feedback. We wanted to know whether our system is accurate, professional, realistic, objective, transparent, complete, supportive, and supports communication. And green on the left side, you see always what participants expected, and then orange what the end answer was. And we are very confident in that we are on the right way, because we are in median always above average. And also concerning attractiveness, perspicuity, effectiveness, dependability, and stimulation, novelty, we are always here in the positive and green fields. So the other thing we did was we tested graphical outputs, because we have, as you saw before, the maps, and we have this visualizations, but we also tested to what extent different kinds of visualizations could be helpful. As you see on the right side, the spider chart. And indeed, spider chart was very supportive, as we got the feedback from our participants. And this representation helped considering or reconsidering and improving the defined scenario which the participants defined in advance. And it also is very helpful for evaluating the corridor modeled by the 3D DSS. However, totally on the right, you see that the capability of changing the opinion is limited, which means that we should work, and we will work in future, on improving this capability to change the user's opinion towards a better or even more optimal solution. The next steps, furthermore, are we want to combine, as I told you before, the algorithm which computes overhead lines with earth cables. Because if you have a look here, this is a villa located in central Switzerland at the Lake of Lucerne, and there in this town, a very famous DJ millionaire lives there, and many millionaires, and they don't want that that the power line passes behind their backyard. That's the NIMBY phenomenon. Other people suggest to bundle the new line with existing lines in order to keep the general loads as least as possible. So now the question arises, where should then the transition buildings between the overhead lines and the earth cables be located? That's one of the main questions. And we have an approach we want to test in the near future. We first determine an area of high stress level where this could be an advantage to build earth cables in. Second, we define or we search at the border of this area which come into question for ideal places where these transition buildings could be located. And then third, we compute the optimal earth cable corridor between these transition stations within this area of a high stress level. And then from these transition buildings, we go to the connection points, the start and in the end. And we're looking forward to tackle this issue. So we are open for questions. This is Joshu Jullier. My name is Joram Schito. We thank you in advance for your questions and thank you for your attention. If you have questions, write us an email. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That was very interesting. Now we still have some time for questions in here. And I already received two about, I can see there's a lot more coming in now, but there's two that I wanted to ask you about how to deal with stakeholders. Now, firstly, how do you price in the potential protests of citizens? Do you do interviews, surveys, or do you analyze other projects and the acceptance there? Is there a way of pricing this?
Yeah, during the studies, we involve different stakeholders coming from national governmental authorities and of planning experts at this step. And in the past also we considered NGOs, different NGOs like landscape planning or nature conservation. And up to now we didn't involve affected citizens. And the main reason for this is that the planning stage in which we are, in which we act, is a very early planning stage, because the goal, the main objective we have is to find different corridor or alternatives, which then should be decided on, and then in another step should be discussed also with the citizens, which might be affected by building the power line.
Yes, and we can also discuss after when we define some corridor alternatives, we can discuss the alternatives in information events with invited direct affected individuals and planning associations, and then we can get the feedback to the decision group, to the decision support group, which helps to decide after the Federal Council to decide which corridor is the most important.
One advantage of the approach is also that MCDA allows to include different opinions by different stakeholders. So this whole approach could be extended in that way that that different opinions could be matched together, or that in order to find the very best solution, that some alternatives are sorted out, so that stakeholders can focus on the important things. Which means that we found out in the past during lots of workshops that stakeholders began to discuss and to debate whether this should be a resistance of 5 instead of 4, but in the end the difference was very little. So our suggestion is to pre-build the whole model and then to focus on the very important parts. And yet a decision support system or also the computing procedure can support stakeholders in finding these very basic alternatives from the beginning on.
And to discuss after these alternatives with the stakeholders. The tool should help us. And to find, finally, we always say the Swiss compromise. This is the solution which everyone could live with, but it's not. It doesn't exist the best solution, because there are always some interests which will not be respected or less respected.
I have also a rather technical question. Did you also implement other MCDA methods other than SAW? Which one? Did they give you different results?
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a very good question. We did indeed. We tested 3 different. We had simple additive weighting, which other experts call it weighted linear combination. It's the same. And we also tested, because the problem the conceptual problem is that if the more layers or the more areas or factors you define, the less important and the less influential these single layers become. So we must be very careful when deciding on which factors you want to include into the decision model. This is the negative part of simple additive weighting, because it simply adds all values up. We also tested, based on this, we tested an approach which adds a logarithm on the whole sum in order to put down areas which are covered multiple times. And the third we tested was a maximum approach, that we took the maximum out of each category, because we said, okay, that's the model, then we leave out the others. And we found out that the difference is very low between simple additive weighting and this logarithm with added logarithm on it. And the maximum should be also avoided, because the results are not realistic enough. So we assume, or we suggest, to use simple additive weighting. Based on this, also we thought about to include different MCDA methods, as the MCDA experts call them. We also used different technique how to ask the values and the resistances and weights from participants. And there we used analytic hierarchy process, and we also found out that between the direct rating method we used up to now and the analytic hierarchy process, the difference is so low that that it's much easier to apply the direct rating, which means that you directly set up the resistance and the weight in the graphical user interface because it's much easier and the result is almost the same.
Okay, thanks for that. I have two questions here about birds. So I know you have environmental protection as a factor in there. Do you also specifically factor in bird mortality and when they could fly into the overhead lines, the flyways, the flight paths?
Thank you for the question. This topic also was discussed lots of times. We do also consider bird protection areas, but as I told you before, the decision model, that's one part we have really to carefully consider together with our partners as Swissgrid. However, the other thing is that we are also bound on the data we get. So for the case in Switzerland, we have areas which are really specified as bird protection areas. And that's a data set we could download and we still use. But we don't model exactly how much probabilities for birds that they fly into the new overhead line. But it was a very good idea to implement this in future.
And I have another question here for Swissgrid. I think, does this impact average time span between thinking and designing the line and actually building it? So does it improve the speed of project implementation?
This is what we hope. I can't say if it does because we didn't use it until now, but with this project, Mettlen-Innertkirchen, which we saw before, which is the case area for this 3D decision support system, we would want to test it and we want to use it for different projects, exactly also to get easier the two most important or three most important alternatives and to discuss these few alternatives after in the decision group and after also in a second step with the direct affected individuals and municipalities in the phase of the trust, in the phase of the track, if we look at the path of the line. But at the moment we don't have experience, but this is the goal, this is the objective, to decrease the time.
And do you think there has been a couple of questions about transferability? Do you think this tool can be used in other countries? Do you know there's any examples already?
Yeah, thank you for the question. In the past, we worked together with APG, which is the TSO of Austria. So we did also studies in Austria. And currently, we are also doing studies in Belgium together with ELIA and in the city of Zurich, we're together with EWZ. So all these areas in Switzerland and in Austria were very challenging because they included also a very challenging topography. And we are sure that, this approach is transferable to other regions. And the point is that we must also rely on the data we got. And data sets you can download from inventories or from public domains, from the government. So the better the data, the database is, which we use, the better and the more reliable the results are. So the data is where we begin, where we start.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we should come to an end now because we are already over time. So thank you so much for presenting and answering the questions. And I think you are available for further questions. You shared your website and the Twitter handle earlier. And I will also send out a feedback survey to everyone that participated today. It would be really nice to take short time for 3 to 4 questions and again, distribute where you can find more information and ask more questions. With that, thank you very much, and I hope everybody is going to have a fantastic week. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.